Señor Presidente, Señor Secretario.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, we are pleased to express our warmest and sincerest congratulations to you on your brilliant and well-deserved election to the presidency of this session of the General Assembly. And for the clearly competent and dynamic way in which you have been conducting our proceedings. We are convinced that accomplishments and successes will be the common denominator of your term of office. To your predecessor, His Excellency Mr. Shamir Shihabi, we want to express our profound appreciation for the exemplary way in which he conducted the proceedings of the last session. Mr. Secretary General, we wish to convey to you the fraternal greetings of the people and government of Equatorial Guinea and special greetings from the President of the Republic, His Excellency Benjamín Mbá Ekua, who congratulates you both on your election as Secretary General of our World Organization and on your efforts in all parts of the world with the sole objective of achieving justice for a better world. Given the complexity of this task, we extend our best wishes to you for your own well-being and that of your family. Distinguished delegates, our greetings and a warm welcome to the new states that have joined the United Nations family. As in a traditional family, the birth of a new member is a symbol of joy and of hope. Joy because of the newfound vitality of our organization, and hope because new experiences, opinions, and alternatives will be provided to help resolve the problems and situations confronting the international community. Our government, convinced that there can be no better unit than one which is founded on diversity, has formally recognized all those states that are members of the Commonwealth of Independent States. And we have begun the establishment of diplomatic relations with each of them. Our government hopes to proceed accordingly with all the new members of the United Nations family. Mr. President. On the political scene, the 47th session of the General Assembly is taking place at a historic time characterized by new crises, new obscurantism, new methods of pressure and of oppression, which stand in real contrast to the hope and the optimism that filled the international community with the announcement of the end of the Cold War. The reason is very clear and appropriately reflected in the report of the Secretary General, where he very rightly states, and I quote, "The Cold War confronted the international community with an unprecedented threat to its security. Resentments, ambition, rivalry, hatred of all types that were covert for decades are now gaining ground and threatening the international harmony and our shared objective." End quote. Table 6, which is contained in the report of the Secretary General on peacekeeping forces and observer missions, testifies very well to this sad reality. Before 1988, the United Nations had conducted 13 missions, and since 1988, the peacekeeping forces and observer missions have been 14 in number. In other words, in a period of under 4 years out of the 47 years of our organization's existence. It is true that on the distant horizon, optimistic and hopeful signs are emerging. But it is equally true that all generations have the right to live in peace, in justice, and security, and to enjoy life and ensure a better legacy to future generations. We note that international conferences and high-level conferences are today becoming the best possibilities for finding solutions to the problems confronting peoples and nations. New York was the scene of the World Summit on Children in September of 1990. Geneva hosted the summit on the promotion of the rights of rural women this year. Rio de Janeiro hosted the Earth Summit in June of 1992. And the international community's agenda includes the holding of the Second World Conference on Human Rights in 1993, the Conference on Population and Development in 1994, one for the advancement of women, and one on social development in 1995. Equatorial Guinea is gratified at these and other similar events, and we reaffirm that for the success and real implementation of their results, the principle of the self-determination of peoples and the promotion of responsible relations among states are prerequisites and are decisive to the rule of justice, peace, and international security. In South Africa, apartheid and racial discrimination continue to take more innocent victims. In Somalia, selfish political interests and a quest for power have combined with natural disasters to speed the disappearance of an entire nation. Civil war in Liberia, which continues to take victims and which is causing the permanent exodus of its nationals, has gone beyond its borders, thus destabilizing the countries of the sub-region and obstructing the way to a peaceful solution to the conflict, a solution which means the holding of free elections in a climate of peace and security. In former Yugoslavia, we see war used to stem the effects of the post-Cold War period, and the establishment of a highly dangerous precedent, if we take into account the fact that the geopolitical and demographic spectrum of the former Yugoslavia is not unique on the international scene. Our Secretary General, Dr. Boutros Boutros-Ghali, revealed this sad reality to us when he indicated very rightly, and I quote, that this is a conflict with an international dimension which threatens the future shape of one or more member states, their security, and even their very existence, end quote. On the Korean Peninsula, just as in Cyprus, intervention and interference in the internal affairs of states, including foreign occupation and domination, continue to play the same role as in the days of the Cold War. The legitimate feeling of the Korean people of both North and South about the reunification of their homeland, and the legitimate aspiration of the Cypriots to their national identity with the eradication of ethnic strife and fierce nationalisms, are increasingly far from being met by peaceful solutions and are getting lost in a sea of hegemonic interests. We believe, Mr. President, that the best contribution of the international community, of the United Nations, and of peace and justice-loving peoples for the peaceful and lasting solution of these and other conflicts is to see to it that, above all interests, the self-determination of the peoples affected prevails and is respected. In Equatorial Guinea, we welcome and applaud the efforts made to restore peace and justice to all the regions affected, and also the humanitarian, multifaceted assistance provided by the international community in the collective context of the United Nations system in general, and in particular by the European Economic Community, the Organization of African Unity, the Movement of Non-Aligned Countries, the Community of States of Western Africa, the United States of America, Japan, and other states, and governmental and non-governmental charitable organizations. Mr. President, distinguished delegates, the increasingly acute economic and financial crisis that afflicts all countries in general, and developing countries in particular, with special emphasis on the least developed among them, continues to be based on the well-known pillars built by the present international economic order, so often denounced in almost all international forums. With the passage of time, the foreign debt is becoming increasingly unpayable, in spite of the efforts and sacrifices constantly made by the debtors to increase their production of exportable raw materials and commodities, and to exercise at the same time the discipline imposed by structural adjustment programs. On international markets, where access is difficult because of the protectionist policies of the wealthy countries of the North, the prices of raw materials are kept low at the same time as the prices of manufactured goods are kept high, much to the despair of the less fortunate of the South. We are certain that for the solution of these and other related problems, in the context of international cooperation for development, all elements necessary are within reach: the reduction of military budgets, progress in the disarmament process, and the curbing of the arms race, which, together with democracy, free markets, and respect for fundamental freedoms, could rapidly bring us to the goal to which we all aspire: well-being. We wish to take the opportunity given us by this World Forum to express in this context our profound and sincerest thanks to the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the United Nations Development Program, and other international financial organizations and individual countries for their ongoing contribution to the task of rehabilitating and building the economic and financial structure of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea. And from this rostrum, we want to invite each and every one of them to continue to work in the same direction and to show support for Equatorial Guinea on the occasion of the third roundtable to be held in the near future in Geneva. Mr. President, in the social sphere and in the area of respect for human rights, Equatorial Guinea cannot presume to be free of all those ills that are often the legacy of the past and that afflict national and world communities in this vital sphere. The economic and financial restrictions caused by the unbalanced international economic order do not make it possible for us to operate enough schools and enough training centers, nor to ensure satisfactory health care for all our inhabitants. Nonetheless, the effort of our government in the context of its very modest means, combined with the outcome of the assistance received from friendly countries and international organizations, is becoming increasingly visible as we improve these sectors. We in Equatorial Guinea believe that as long as a people lacks the basic infrastructure to resolve problems of education, medical pharmaceutical assistance, environmental health, the provision of drinking water, housing, and so on and so forth, the concept of human rights needs to be given serious and profound thought. By combining all aspects and factors surrounding the human being, including the effects of the work of man's natural enemies, our government has begun to work toward complete enjoyment of fundamental freedoms and guarantee of respect for human rights. In this framework, and because we support and because they support the national efforts made by the constitutional organs and specialized commissions such as the National Commission for Human Rights, the National Commission for Support of the Equatorial Guinean Child, and the Commission for the Protection of the Environment, to mention just the few, we express our deepest thanks to UNESCO, to FAO, to the WHO, UNICEF, the World Food Program, the United Nations Fund for Population Activities, etc., and to all those who directly or indirectly provide effective and selfless assistance to our country. Mr. President, in this brief review of the question of human rights, we cannot fail to mention the erroneous vision that is held of our country in the Commission on Human Rights and in certain journalistic circles. We believe and we maintain that the Commission for Human Rights is an organ which works for the United Nations and therefore for the member states. Its components, including experts and rapporteurs, cannot become prosecutors acting against sovereign members of the United Nations, nor can they take over the role that a country's legal order and international law give to state authorities. We noted with regret that in exchange for the firm political will and readiness of our government to promote respect for human rights in Equatorial Guinea, by providing inter alia all sorts of logistic assistance, local transportation, public and private sector contacts, access to public, private locations and locations that are reserved for security reasons, etc. The report of the rapporteur designated for Equatorial Guinea only denigrates the image of our country and our government. It incites violence and undermines peace and order that prevail in the country. While rejecting, purely and simply, the report presented to the Commission on Human Rights at its session in Geneva in March of this year because it lacks realism and objectivity, the government of Equatorial Guinea pledges to the international community that within its means it will continue its program in defense of human rights and fundamental freedoms as begun in August, on the 3rd of August of 1979, in a climate of peace, justice, harmony, and understanding, and that it will not allow itself to be swayed by attempts at intimidation or provocation. Equatorial Guinea wishes to express its satisfaction at the efforts made by the international community at the bilateral and multilateral levels to promote disarmament and non-proliferation of weapons at the global, regional, and sub-regional levels. In this respect, and upon the initiative of the Economic Community of the States of Central Africa, we welcome the decision of the General Assembly to support the preparation of measures for confidence building, disarmament, and development, as well as the establishment of a standing consultative committee in charge of security questions in Central Africa. Its program and timetable of activities, prepared during the organizational meeting held in Yaoundé in July of this year, we hope will be given the complete support of this session. We could not conclude this statement without availing ourselves of the opportunity to inform this distinguished assembly of the current state of the process of democratization which is being conducted in our country. We overwhelmingly approved our new fundamental law at the end of last year, and it is based, inter alia, and I quote, on the principles of social justice, reaffirmed solemnly in the rights and freedoms of the human being, as defined and enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, end quote. It, at the same time, recognizes political pluralism in Equatorial Guinea. A package of laws regulating these rights and freedoms was promulgated at the beginning of this year, and a transition government was established with the sole and exclusive mission of preparing the people and adapting the institutions of the Republic to the realities of the day, characterized by multi-party democracy. And this has been the case over the 12 months coming to an end at the end of this year, 1992. At the present time, 5 political parties, that is the Democratic Party of Equatorial Guinea, the Popular Union, the Democratic Liberal Convention, the Social Democrat Party, and the Union for Social Democracy, have been registered and made official under the provisions of the Law of Political Parties dated 6 January 1992, and they are already conducting their political activities throughout the country in a climate of dialogue, order, peace, and tranquility. In the same direction, and with the twofold objective of involving all the forces of the country in the construction of a new era of democratic coexistence on the one hand, and On the other hand, with the objective of alleviating the sad and heavy burden that the phenomenon of exile and displaced persons presupposes for the international community, His Excellency, the President of the Republic, Benjamín Mbá, approved and promulgated for the second time since 1979 the law of amnesty, under which, and I quote, all acts or omissions of a political nature described as offenses and crimes of a political nature in the Penal Code or in special penal laws passed prior to 2 December 1991 are forgiven and forgotten. Therefore, and again I quote, all Equatorial Guinean citizens benefiting from this amnesty who are outside the country will be able freely to enter the national territory and reside in it. They shall enjoy all rights and freedoms under the conditions set forth in the fundamental law and other legal provisions of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea. End quote. In this context, we hope that on the same humanitarian grounds that inspired the governments of the host countries, international, governmental, and non-governmental organizations, these will all continue to give all the necessary assistance to facilitate the voluntary return of our brothers and sisters, just as our government has already taken and will continue to take steps to facilitate their return and to ensure their incorporation in Equatorial Guinean society. In the coming months, the Chamber of Representatives of the People, in other words, the Equatorial Guinean Parliament, will be deciding on the draft electoral law, which is to be prepared with the help and participation of all political parties that are duly established. This will conclude the medium-term actions planned and will lead to the last stage in the process of democratization through the organization and holding of municipal, legislative, and presidential elections in the Republic of Equatorial Guinea. Mr. President, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, may we conclude our statement by emphasizing the relevance and the timeliness of the report of the Secretary General, Dr. Boutros Ghali, which has been termed Agenda for Peace. We believe that the contents of this important instrument constitute a challenge to our generation and to the United Nations, since if, by preventive diplomacy at the national and international levels, we succeed in attaining the objective of, and I quote, trying to pinpoint at the very beginning those situations that could cause conflicts and through diplomacy, try to eliminate the sources of danger before the outbreak of violence, end quote. We will have marked the real beginning of the new era, and future generations will indeed be grateful. Thank you.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Francophonie of Equatorial Guinea for his statement.